Chapter 40. This is it, my mind screamed. The beginning of the end. It always came with the rapid pounding of the heart. "Carlyle," I called quietly, but he and Alice were already on their way up the stairs. They came in swiftly, both of their eyes flying right to Bella. "Listen," I murmured. "Ah," Carlyle said. "It's almost over. She never awoke, never had any apparent pain. This is an incredible miracle." Alice's eyes burned bright, visions flickering at light speed through her mind. She was running downstairs, coming back up with the others, standing gathered in the corner of the room, Bella's eyes flying open. She bounced on her toes with delight.
"Soon,"
she said, smiling.
"I'll get the others."
Rosalie wasn't in her visions. She searched, finding her obscured, blurred out by Renesmee.
"Should I have Rosalie?"
"Yes, keep the baby away." Suddenly, Bella's fingers twitched. We all gasped in surprise, and I grasped her hand eagerly. "Bella? Bella, love?" I asked anxiously. But she didn't respond, her fingers again limp and motionless in my hand. I glanced up anxiously at Carlyle. He met my eyes. "We need to be ready. This could happen at any moment," he thought. "We need Jasper." He looked pointedly at Alice. Alice took in our silent exchange.
"I'll bring them right up."
I looked back down at Bella, her heart beating at a relentless, furious pace. I gripped her hand in mine. "It's okay, Bella. It's okay," I chanted. "It's almost over, almost over. I'm right here. I'm with you, love. I'm with you." Vaguely, in the background, I heard my family filing into the room. "By the door," Jasper whispered. "Emmett, next to me. No, Carlyle, you stand with Esme. Alice, behind us."
"I want to see her,"
Alice said eagerly. "Get behind me, Alice," Jasper hissed. Alice sighed. "Stay still, everyone. No movements when she first wakes. Don't even breathe. Don't do anything that might surprise or antagonize her." And then, suddenly, Bella's heart somehow began to beat impossibly faster. Her body arched violently off the table. "Oh, God!" I moaned in panic. Her chest was thrust forward in tight agony, while her limbs continued to lay slack at her side. But her face, oh, her face! It was torturously strained, every muscle cramped against pain and agony. How was she not screaming? Emmett wondered. I clutched her hand even tighter. "I'm sorry, Bella. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, love." My voice was cracking. "Oh, please let this end." "It's all right, Edward," thought Carlyle. "This is what we expected. This is the end." "Be quiet, Edward," thought Jasper anxiously. "Don't say anything or touch her when she wakes." Bella's heartbeat overtook me then. It thundered through me, relentless and intense. All I could hear, all I could feel. The raging beat set off every alarm in my mind. Too fast, too fast. After so long of protecting her heart, my mind couldn't seem to accept that this speed was what we wanted. The raging beat seemed to stretch on endlessly, a marathon of agony and fear, when suddenly everything paused, constricting into a single, loud, hollow beat. Deathly silence followed for a fraction of a second, and then her heart skipped twice, paused again, and then beat one last melancholy time. One last effort from the heart that had kept her alive for so long. One last beat, and then it fell quiet. There was pure silence for several moments. My family stood frozen, not moving, not breathing, waiting on edge, watching, wondering, except for Alice.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Bella opened her eyes. Alice's mind exploded with visions. Bella smiling in my arms. My family standing in the window, smiling down. silver stilettos flying through the air into the house, Bella leaping the river, Bella scaling a tree, Bella and I at the cottage door. 1,000 images seemed to flutter through her mind.
"Oh, Edward,"
she moaned in satisfaction. I could watch only Bella. She was perfectly still, except for her eyes, crimson red, which moved almost imperceptibly, clearly taking in her surroundings. Suddenly she inhaled, and her eyes shut ever so briefly, as if she was reading, memorizing the scents around her. Then they opened again, and I could see wonder and amazement reflected in their depths. Slowly, those emotions spread to her face, and then out to Jasper, and as her calm wonder washed over him, it spread out to everyone in the room. There was almost a collective breath of relief as my family relaxed. "Ah, she's doing well, Edward," thought Carlyle. "Amazingly calm." "Stay still," Jasper instructed me. I wanted to say something to her, but I knew Jasper wanted me to give her time to take in her surroundings, to acclimate herself. I waited impatiently for her to look at me, for her to speak, her hand in mine. She continued to stare silently at the ceiling, and as the moments passed, I began to feel anxious, worried that she might be confused or upset. I wanted to make sure that she knew I was here with her. Jasper caught my emotions. "Patience, Edward. Just wait." But I couldn't help it. I gave her hand a small squeeze. Her reaction was shocking and instantaneous. She flipped off the table with incredible grace and speed. My hand, still in hers, was pulled forward until she whipped her fingers out of mine with blinding strength. "Christ!" Jasper thought, as he and Emmett threw their arms out in front of the others.
"She'll be fine,"
Alice called, trying to peer around Jasper as he held her back with his arm. Bella whirled once in mid-air, landing several feet away, and immediately moved into a defensive crouch. Her eyes glowed, bright and intense, and her expression was defensive. "Way to go, bro," thought Emmett, a slight grin playing on his lips.
"Oh, Edward, you scared her,"
Esme lamented. Jasper was watching her intently, trying to figure out the direction of her emotions. Anger or fear would probably mean an attack on me, since it had been my small movement that set off the defensive instinct, or possibly the family, as they were the larger threat. Thirst would mean stopping her before she could get to the door. "You keep her from going out the window, Edward," he thought. I realized my hands were still out in the air, my body pulled slightly over the table. Bella remained crouched, hands up in front, ready. Her eyes were cool and wary, her face guarded. We stared at each other. She looked at me, unemotional, as if she had never seen me before. She hates me, I thought, with wretched certainty, just as I had always feared. She hates me for doing this to her. Her eyes eased sideways, taking in my frozen family. She inhaled, testing the air again, as if searching for something, for danger. Her gaze lingered on Alice for a moment, who was grinning broadly, unperturbed. Then her eyes came back to rest upon my face. "Be ready, Edward," Jasper thought. But then, unexpectedly, Bella stood up, leaving her defensive pose, her face still guarded, but more relaxed. Her hands flew to her sides. Jasper frowned in surprise, but lowered his hands slowly, and Emmett followed his lead. Her eyes roamed for a second over my face, and then her expression miraculously softened. Her eyes filled with warmth and wonder as she looked at me. Suddenly, she was the girl that I knew and loved, and finally the relief flowed through me, warm and healing. Awake, alive, safe. We had done it. She had done it. It took all of my strength to remain still, to strangle the urge to rush over and gather her in my arms. Instead, For a moment, I just drank her in. The cascade of her hair, the curve of her face, the sleek lines of her body, fluid with movement. She was incredible, beauty and power and strength, in a sensuous, graceful form. My entire family was staring at her, captivated.
"She's so lovely,"
thought Esme. "Oh man, Edward." Emmett's gaze was appreciative. "You hit the jackpot." Needing, wanting, having to be close to her, I began to move very slowly around the table. Slowly, Edward, Jasper thought. I watched her carefully, deliberately placing my feet at a measured pace, allowing her ample time to anticipate where each step would be, exactly where my body would be in the next moment. I kept my hand up, stretched towards her, a gesture of invitation, and her brilliant eyes watched each movement I made. I paused on the other side of the table, waiting to see if she would speak. "Bella?" I asked quietly. She seemed to start slightly at the sound of my voice, her eyes growing even more intense. I waited, not wanting to rush her, to allow her time to take it all in. I knew she was hearing and smelling and seeing everything, as if she had never experienced her senses before. I not only recalled this from my transition, but I had also experienced it in the minds of my family, and I knew how unsettling it could be. I hoped she wasn't upset or scared. "Bella, love, I'm sorry. I know it's disorienting, but you're all right. Everything is fine." She frowned slightly, anxiety fluttering across her face. Her body stiffened slightly, and I could see her mind working behind her eyes. I realized if I just leaned forward a little more, I could touch her with my hand. I lifted my finger slightly, and Jasper shook his head minutely at me. "Don't." But I had to let her know I was here for her. I had to connect with her in some way. Moving excruciatingly slow, I let my fingers glide down the skin of her cheek. Her eyes widened, burning within the crimson pupils. Her lips parted slightly as she sucked in a quick breath. I paused, unable to quite distinguish her reaction. I cupped my hand onto her cheek, waiting for her to speak.
"It's just going to be a hug,"
Alice suddenly thought anxiously. Before I could read what she meant, Bella's arms wrapped swiftly around me. "Damn it! Jesus, Edward, be careful!" Jasper ranted mentally. He went to make a move towards us, but I shot him a sharp look, Alice's hand tight on his arm. It was just a hug. "Unexpected," mused Carlyle. I reached my arms tentatively around Bella, gently laying them against her back. In my mind, I knew I didn't have to treat her so carefully anymore. She was no longer fragile, breakable, but my limbs couldn't seem to accept this yet, so long trained to handle her as a delicate, precious object. I sighed against her, ecstatic over the physical connection, amazed and pleased that she would want to touch me at this point. I couldn't believe that thirst wasn't controlling her every desire. I wondered how long this could hold. Bella's embrace grew tighter. I was taken aback by the unfamiliar, sheer strength that flowed from her limbs. She pressed her face into my chest, her hands digging into my back. Suddenly, I could feel things bending the wrong way, and I realized in a second or two there would be a crack. A sharp pain began to bloom in my chest. I panicked slightly, not wanting to push her away, but knowing she would be even more upset if she hurt me. I tried to subtly adjust my position, but she noticed immediately. She looked up at me, hurt and confusion painted on her face, as she, of course, interpreted my gesture as rejection. Damn. Here we go, thought Jasper. He exchanged a look with Emmett, and they both crouched slightly. Alice rolled her eyes.
"She'll be fine. I don't see her attacking at all. Just reassure her, Edward."
I felt a flash of anger at myself for upsetting her, but kept it carefully concealed, not wanting to agitate her further. It was her strength that was the problem, not her. Carefully, Bella. Ow. She froze and then whipped back from me, her hand shooting behind her back. Concern flooded her face. Oops, she mouthed silently. God, how I love her. A smile of joy broke out on my face, happiness shining through me at having her awake, standing before me, and finally being able to speak to her and see her familiar expressions and reactions. Don't panic, love, I said softly, my fingertips brushing her lips. You're just a bit stronger than I am for the moment. A small crease appeared between her eyebrows as she thought this through. I ran my fingers down her cheek again, while I waited for her to accept this alien concept, that she could actually hurt me. And then her expression altered, her face suddenly aglow with warmth and affection. Her hand moved from behind her back, and very slowly inched up towards my face. Careful now, son, thought Carlyle.
Don't let her put her arms around you again, Edward,
Esme fretted. Jasper was still worried. She's incredibly calm, but her mood could swing at any moment. I shut him out. I shut them all out. I understood that they were just worried, for both of us, but they couldn't see the look in Bella's eyes as I could. Their depths may have been an unfamiliar color, and the face they sat in may have changed, but in her gaze was an expression I had seen 1,000,000 times, an expression that never seemed less than miraculous, an expression she held only for me. Her fingers, no longer hot against my skin, but instead emanating a simple warmth, stroked softly once down my cheek.
I love you.
Her voice shimmered like gold, flowing through my mind, the nectar of the gods, clear and new, and yet layered with familiar undertones, and everything melted away in that instant, her words a salve for 1,000 worries, all the waiting and anxiety of the last 2 days, the crushing black cloud of agony and despair during her pregnancy, the dread that had clung to me since the day, so long ago now, that I first saw Alice's vision of Bella's red eyes. It had all lifted in this moment, seemingly weightless now, blown clear away by the beauty and love and life in her face. I looked down into her eyes, past the unfamiliar crimson irises, and into the soul that I knew with complete and utter certainty was still there, and I spoke the simple, absolute truth that was ablaze in the center of my universe. As I love you. Very gently, I took Bella's face in my hands, holding her between my palms, eternally mine now. I bent down slowly and kissed her softly, once, twice, feeling the waves of love and thankfulness rising and cresting, breaking over me. And then, for once, finally, I followed my natural instincts and deepened the kiss, opening my lips, pressing into her and inviting her into me. I tasted her on my tongue, sweet honey ambrosia, as I inhaled deeply, pulling her luscious scent eagerly down my throat. Still floral, still freesia, but purely delightful and exquisite now, instead of tempting. Her tongue met mine, and the feel of her in my mouth was like nothing I had experienced. Bella pressed her body against mine, curving one leg up slightly, and wrapped an arm around my back, as I leaned into her embrace, kissing her even harder, with an unfamiliar, carefree abandon. How much I had been holding back, much, much more than I had even realized, to know that I couldn't hurt her, to be able to truly experience this with every portion of my mind. No burn, no venom, no fear, was beyond the brilliant power of this small act of letting go. I reeled at the thought of what it would be like to be with Bella in other, more intimate ways. Whoa there, Edward, Jasper thought, laughing internally. Do you mind? Emmett cleared his throat. Get a room, bro. Bella pulled back as soon as she heard Emmett clear his throat, stepping away from me, chagrin on her face. I stepped with her, keeping her body against mine. I wasn't embarrassed. I'd witnessed enough intimate moments amongst my family, albeit mostly unintentionally, that they owed me this, and I didn't want to let her go yet. I still couldn't believe she was content this early on to let me hold her. Bella breathed deeply, gazing up at me, slight surprise glowing on her face. I realized she had been surprised by the intensity of the kiss. Letting go had clearly been a good thing.
You've been holding out on me.
Her voice rang, eyes quizzical. I laughed, thrilled by her reaction, by her very presence, safe and well in my arms. Finally, Bella had survived, her body now as enduring as our love, and we would never again be apart. It was sort of necessary at the time, I said. Now it's your turn not to break me. My family shifted around, laughing lightly, both amused and curious. Such control, marveled Carlyle. He stepped around Emmett, smiling, and walked towards Bella, his expression only slightly cautious, while Jasper ghosted behind him, still nervous. Carlyle stopped a few feet from us. "How do you feel, Bella?" he asked. Bella paused, thinking for a second.
Overwhelmed,
she said slowly.
There's so much.
She trailed off, looking distracted. "Yes," said Carlyle, remembering the cascade of sensations when his transition had been completed. "It can be quite confusing." Bella nodded quickly.
But I feel like me, sort of. I didn't expect that.
Her words were such a delightful relief. I wanted her to feel like herself, for this transition to be as painless as possible. My family all smiled, their minds dancing with happiness for the both of us, and I hugged her to me. "I told you so," I said quietly. "You are quite controlled," Carlyle mused. "Just amazing. More so than I expected, even with the time you had to prepare yourself mentally for this." Bella's expression fell slightly, unhappiness passing through her eyes.
I'm not sure about that,
she whispered. Carlyle nodded, not wanting to downplay whatever distressing feeling she was experiencing. "The morphine," he suddenly remembered. His expression lit slightly with the doctor's curiosity. "It seems like we did something right with the morphine this time. Tell me, what do you remember of the transition process?" Bella was silent for a long moment. Tension coiled inside me, waiting with dread to hear what she had gone through during those days of unconsciousness. I tried to breathe steadily, exude a calm I did not feel.
Everything was very dim before. I remember the baby couldn't breathe.
Bella suddenly glanced up at me with stark horror in her eyes. I felt a jolt of realization that she had no idea what happened with Renesmee, except that she had been born safely. "Renesmee is healthy and well," I said quickly, wanting to allay her fears. A thrill of excitement rocketed through me, and I realized I couldn't wait to introduce Bella to our extraordinary, miraculous daughter. I saw some of the worry drain out of her eyes as she regarded my expression, replaced by quick curiosity. But I wanted to broach the reality of her transformation first. Had she been in pain? Had she heard any of the events that had transpired throughout the house while she was still unconscious? "What do you remember after that?" I asked. Bella's face went very still.
It's hard to remember,
she said, her voice impassive.
It was dark before, and then I opened my eyes, and I could see everything.
"Amazing," murmured Carlyle, delighted with the concept that the morphine had been so effective. But behind him I saw Jasper's lips pressed together, a slight frown on his face. His eyes flickered to mine, and he tried to clear his thoughts. "It's nothing, Edward." But I had seen that he didn't think her words matched her emotions. or what he had felt from her during the last portion of her transformation. Next to him, Alice's face was skeptical as well, as she tried to discern Bella's expression. I looked at Bella. She kept her eyes carefully on Carlyle. I didn't know if perhaps Alice and Jasper were being unnecessarily paranoid. Bella must have so many emotions and thoughts flying through her mind right now. It was hard to interpret her expressions. We would just have to trust her words, and I wanted them to be true. Carlyle was convinced that the morphine had been the difference for her. "I want you to tell me everything," Carlyle said excitedly. Anxiety flashed across Bella's face. Carlyle was annoyed with himself. "Perhaps this is not the time for this discussion." "Oh, I'm so sorry, Bella," he said quickly. "I apologize, Edward. How thoughtless of me. Of course your thirst must be very uncomfortable. This conversation can wait." Bella's eyes suddenly seemed to burn brighter, and she put her hand on her throat, as if feeling the fire we were all familiar with for the first time. Jasper, who had been concentrating carefully on Bella, received a wave of thirst from her. "Better get her out to hunt, Edward," he thought. "Oh boy, I can't wait to see this," thought Emmett with delight. I unwrapped my arms from around her body and grabbed her hand, pulling her gently towards the window. "Let's hunt, Bella,"